Welcome to the show, ladies. I am so happy to have you on the Autism Little Learners Podcast.
Thank you. We're excited.
Can't wait.
Can you tell us a little bit about yourselves?
Yeah. Should I go first?
Yeah, you always
Okay.
do.
I'm Rachel Harrington. I'm a certified occupational therapy assistant, also certified primitive reflex clinical specialist. I'm a mom of two. I have a 3-year-old and a 20-month-old and a dog. We live in Boise, Idaho, and I am just obsessed with all things sensory, primitive reflexes. I love sharing all about it to anyone who will listen and let me nerd out about it.
I'm Jessica Hill, and I have the same certifications as Rachel, so I don't have to repeat them. I'm the mother of a 10-year-old. We also live in Boise, and then both Rachel and I work for Harkla, which is a local company that we joined a couple of years ago. We are the hosts of the All Things Sensory podcast. And then I'm also working in an outpatient pediatric clinic 2 days a week, working with clients with a variety of needs.
That's awesome. So you two are really busy. It sounds
Yeah.
And we've been lucky enough to talk once before because I was on your podcast and
Nice.
we didn't know each other before that except social media. So it was really fun to get to know you and now have you on mine and be able to talk more and specifically about autism.
Yeah,
And
we're pretty much BFFs now,
I
we
know.
clicked, when you feel it.
Yes. Yeah, that's totally true. And I had forgotten you're in Boise. I knew you were out west somewhere, but
Out west. I love that we're out west.
Yeah, right.
I know, right? Really?
Yeah. Oh, you're out west, it's just, and we don't even think anything of it,
No.
but
That's
it's
funny.
funny.
I lived in Denver for a year and some kids were talking. Overheard this little girl talking and she was like, yeah, that new teacher with the accent. And then I realized she was talking about me and I'm like, oh my gosh, I have the the
Yes,
Midwestern
yes.
North Dakota accent. I'm like, we don't think we have any kind of accent. So it's kind of funny.
Yes.
Yep, totally can hear it.
Well, I don't know who wants to go first, but for any of my listeners that are new to special education, new to if they're a parent, maybe their child being diagnosed, or a new teacher, can you explain what is an OT and what kind of skills do you work on to support kids in the classroom or even in the clinic setting?
Yeah.
Sure.
OT is a beautiful profession. Like it's something that no one really knows about. We're not finding people jobs. We are truly helping people live their lives to their fullest with as much independence as possible. So for kids, that looks like supporting their, main occupation, which is play. And that's how we help them learn is through play activities. But we also help them with their activities of daily living, things like eating, drinking, going to the bathroom, getting from one place to another, taking baths, really anything that they have to do to get through their day successfully. We are there to help them, and whatever modifications, whatever skills we can work on to help them just live their best life.
Yeah, and a big piece of that is working with the child's family because they can come to therapy, whether it's in a clinic setting or if they're receiving services at school, they're doing that once, maybe twice a week, but then the rest of the time they're home or out in the community. So a big part of our jobs as pediatric therapists is to help teach the families these skills and strategies to implement in other environments as well.
I think that what you said right there is so important because all of us as therapists, me as a speech therapist, you two as OTs, we're with kids like this small percentage of the time. And so whatever we can teach parents or support them on, going with things that they maybe already intuitively are understanding or knowing what to do with their child, but maybe expanding on it a little, that's where the change is going to happen and going to help kids be more successful.
Exactly.
Yeah. And that's the beautiful thing is we do get to see that shift and we get to see so much progress in our clients and our kiddos and who we're teaching and even with the families. And a lot of families and caregivers will have those aha moments too, especially in the sensory world when we're explaining to them those sensory challenges and they're like, Oh, wow. I struggle with that too. And then they get to go on that learning journey for themselves and kind of figure out their own nervous system too, which is cool to see.
Yeah, that made me think of a podcast interview I did a couple weeks ago. It just came out this week, and I was contacted by a high school classmate, and he messaged me. We're friends on Facebook, but he messaged me and he said, "Tara, hey, I thought maybe we could talk because I was just diagnosed with autism," and
Mm.
he's 53.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and one of the things he said looking back were a lot of sensory things that he just thought were him or, he thought negatively about himself for having issues with certain clothing and um, loud sounds and just kind of he's still going through this self-discovery because this only happened within the last 2 months that he was given a diagnosis. And so that sensory piece, I think for parents to learn about it and staff members is so important because it explains so much.
Yes.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think for parents and educators, it's so important. Children often spend a majority of their time in school. And so if their teacher can understand that all of their students have unique sensory needs, but maybe there's a couple of students in their class who need extra sensory support. And if they can understand that, and then they can have strategies in their tool belt to pull from to help those students specifically, then those students are going to be able to thrive in the classroom instead of, being labeled as the bad kid or struggling and resisting school and maybe not even wanting to go to school.
Totally. In that interview, he was explaining to me he was labeled the bad kid and was sent to a different school, and that didn't go well. So they just held him back. And then a couple of years
Oh,
later, they held him back again.
oh,
So he's
wow.
like, Tara, I didn't know if you knew this, but I was 2 years older than all of you. We didn't know in high school because he's like, I was so embarrassed, so you think of the mental aspect of that and for kids that just in general aren't getting their needs met. And
Mhm.
especially when I do trainings, I've worked with such amazing OTs over the years. Like, I don't know, I think speech and OT are like two peas in a pod because
Yes.
we really support each other. But I always talk to people first, we need to have regulation in place. If kids are dysregulated, we're not going to be able to work on verbs or any of those other higher level skills. And that certainly has to be in place first.
Yes.
Definitely. Yeah.
Yeah, those higher level cognitive abilities and skills don't fire and work if the child is in fight or flight or if they're having sensory overload. It's not going to happen.
Yeah, the nervous system just takes over and nervous system, anxiety, all of that. And it makes it really hard to learn. So, can you talk about some sensory issues that are common for young autistic kids?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing to think about is when we're talking about sensory modulation disorder, sensory processing disorder, we have our 8 senses, and typically we can be over responsive or under responsive or sensory seeking to all of them in different ways. So it's not going to be a cut and dry. We're either a sensory seeker to everything or under responsive or avoidant to everything as well. So we think about the kiddos who are more sensory seeking, they're the ones who are having a hard time sitting down, they're spinning, they're running and crashing and bouncing, they're touching everything, they're putting everything in their mouths, they're smelling everything, they're just trying to meet that need that their brain is craving. They just can't satisfy that need to get more input. And then on the flip side, we have the kiddos who are more hesitant, more avoidant. So anytime their feet leave the ground, they're uncomfortable, they don't like to swing, they are oftentimes labeled as picky eaters, they are bothered by bright lights, they don't like the toilet flushing, they cover their ears with loud noises. Um, what other
Did you
ones?
mention clothing?
Oh, the textures on their clothing, like you had mentioned, they just are itchy and uncomfortable, and if you put their socks on wrong, they have a complete meltdown.
Yeah.
So we could be over responsive, under responsive, and you can be avoidant of vestibular input and you can crave auditory input or vice versa. And so I think it's really helpful to recognize that these sensory patterns definitely impact a child's behavior. And I think it's so important to rule out those sensory challenges to help meet those needs before we say, okay, is this a behavior? Are they struggling with this? Can they not focus? Or are their sensory needs just not met?
Yeah, that makes sense. When you were saying that, I think of all these different students from over the
Yeah.
years pop into my mind. And I think all of us have in our classroom sensory tools like a weighted lap pad or fidget toys or the noise blocking or noise reducing headphones. And I think the trick is for people to figure out how to individualize within that.
Mhm.
Like some kids that are moving, craving that movement, they might need something different than the child that's avoiding any input. And I've even had kids where we're at group time and I have a swing in my classroom. And some kids, it's hard to explain to other people when they say, well, why should he get to swing while the other kids are sitting at group? And it's like, that's what his body needs. He needs to move to learn. So having an OT help you figure those things out is essential.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. If you are an educator and you are noticing that some of your students are struggling with, controlling their body, struggling with following directions, struggling with social skills, struggling with navigating their environment safely, like it would be so helpful to chat with the school OT, or if you have a friend that's an OT or COTA, and get some strategies for those students.
Yeah. Yeah. I hope everybody really takes that to heart and especially after you've been teaching for a while, you start to kind of know from what you've learned what different kids might need. But when you get hung up on a student that just isn't responding or has behaviors, those are the kids you really want to seek out that additional help for.
Sometimes just having a new perspective, new ideas, just to brainstorm and bounce ideas off of each other is really helpful because you can try all the things and they're great things, but just having an outsider's perspective, like, oh, did you try this? And oh my gosh, why didn't I think of that? But when you're in the thick of it, it's hard to think about all these, other possibilities that could be impacting them.
Yeah, that's exactly it. I think I've been there so many times over the
Oh,
years.
yeah.
All the
Oh, yeah.
time.
Yeah. And I think it's almost with anything, whether it's an OT or regulation related thing or just something else in the classroom. Like we need to set our pride aside and say, okay, I could use another look at this.
Yes,
Yes.
It makes
exactly.
you a better teacher.
Mhm.
Totally.
So we hear a lot about self-regulation. And I've kind of been doing a deep dive into this the last couple years because the term co-regulation has come up more and more. You guys have probably known about it forever, but I think it's being talked about more. And kind of when I was doing my research, I discovered typically at the preschool level, kids need more co-regulation than self-regulation. And self-regulation, full self-regulation, doesn't happen usually till after adolescence because the brain part as kids get older. But we're not as aware of co-regulation. Can you explain the difference between the two and kind of that age thing where what's normal for kids at the preschool level?
Yeah, so self-regulation is when you have the skills and ability to regulate your own nervous system, your own emotions. You're aware of what the emotions feel like in your body, and you have the tools and strategies in the moment to help yourself if you feel anxious or nervous or whatever it is. Co-regulation is when you have someone else with you. So when we're talking about children specifically, it's an adult, a caregiver, a teacher, a therapist who is there with them in those moments of dysregulation. And that adult is going to help them to regulate. They're going to be a calm space. They're going to use a soft voice. They're going to help provide strategies for the child to feel more calm and regulated.
Yeah, I almost like to think of it as you are sharing your calm with the child in that moment. So if the child's melting down and they're screaming and crying and pulling their hair out, trying to punch you, kick you, you are sitting there quietly, calm, talking calmly, no matter how crazy things are getting. And then you're just sharing, hey, this is my calm. I'm going to just share it with you a little bit to help you calm down.
And we were talking a little bit about the age thing before we hopped on with you, because we thought that was just such a great question. And I think we came up with the idea of like, there's no real age that we can say, this is the age when your child should be able to self-regulate. There are so many factors when it comes to a child's ability to regulate themselves. There's their own nervous system, and is their nervous system in fight or flight, or are their caregivers helping provide strategies so that the child can better understand their emotions. There's so many factors that it's difficult to say. I think it's impossible to say that this is the age when your child should be able to self-regulate.
Yeah. So we're all going to rely somewhat on co-regulation through those early years because, there
Yeah.
really isn't a set point where, okay, we've all got it together now for the rest of our lives, but
Yeah,
kind of knowing how to go back and forth between
yeah.
them.
And I was just
Yeah.
thinking, as an adult, I'm married, I have a spouse, and when I'm stressed or when I'm struggling, I lean on him to help me stay calm. If we're in the thick of witching hour at the end of the day and one of us is, getting a little bit more frustrated, the other one is calm, and so that's the thing, is like we're constantly using those co-regulation skills and tools as adults as well.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, you're right. And I'm glad you brought that up because I feel like in the classroom, we need to rely on each other as adults,
Mhm.
like you and your husband rely on each other when one is getting frustrated or having trouble exuding the calm vibes with a
Mhm.
child because maybe they've been in the thick of it for a while. It's okay to tag team, like say, can you take over? I'm going to
Gotta
just
tap
go
out.
do
That's
something.
always mine. Yeah, I've got to tap out. I need to take a
Yeah.
quick break. And that way kids learn and kids see that too. They see you, maybe getting a little frustrated and taking a break and calming your body down, getting a drink, doing a windmill, whatever it is that you need. And kids pick up on that and they see you using those tools as well.
Well, I was just even thinking, we do this in the clinic all the time, as a therapist, I'm working with a child and the child is having a meltdown for whatever reason, sensory, they want something, they're in fight or flight, whatever it is. And I'm in the thick of it. And so often I work with such great therapists in the clinic that I'm at. One of the other therapists who maybe it doesn't have a child right then, a client right then, will come in and help, and they'll bring some things over. They'll bring an AAC device or a weighted lap pad or bubbles or whatever to help with the situation, because the more calm people you can have in that situation, the more calm you can share with the child.
Mhm.
Yeah, absolutely. And along that vein, not being prideful and as the adult
Oh,
and
that's
saying
huge.
like, I wanted to get him through this, or, he is gonna, they view it sometimes as a power struggle. And then if I let someone else take over, then I lose and the child wins. And that's like that behavioral kind of outlook. And that is so far from, I think, what is helpful. We need to set our pride aside. And if the other person coming over snaps the child out of it immediately, that's a win for everyone. Sometimes just that change of faces and change of pace, redirection is all that's needed.
Yeah. If I'm in the moment with a child and another therapist comes over to help and they get them out of that moment, I'll buy that therapist coffee. I mean,
Yeah.
so much. And also, what did you do differently than what I was doing so that I can try that next time? Like I feel like I have over the years definitely pushed that pride to the very back, because I'm like, I will take all the help I can get.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And thinking what's best for kids, what's
Mhm.
best for the child. Okay,
Yep.
if you were a parent, you'd want the other person to be allowed to come help get your child out of this dysregulation and pain and anxiety.
Absolutely.
So we talked about this just a little bit at the beginning, but why do you need regulation in order for kids to learn? Is it really a foundational skill that you need before teaching autistic kids or any kids?
I love that you brought this up because we just recorded a podcast about the pyramid of learning. And the basis of it is that it's a pyramid and you have all of the foundational skills that build to get to the top, which is that higher level learning. And so at the bottom is the central nervous system, sensory integration, and primitive reflex integration, which if you have missing components, missing building blocks, then you're never going to be able to achieve that higher level, coordination and learning abilities. And so truly, if we don't have that strong foundation of regulation, sensory integration, the child will struggle in the future, and they will struggle with those academic skills. And we can't ask a kid to sit down at the table and focus on a task if they can't even regulate their nervous system. So it truly is one of the most important things. And we have to kind of put I say sensory goggles on and kind of identify what's missing, what tools we can provide, what activities we can incorporate in order for them to regulate their nervous system. Okay, they're regulated, we can learn, we can focus, whatever that looks like.
Yeah. I think with thinking about regulation in my framework, I have regulation as the first thing, and then connection. So building a positive relationship, and then routines, predictable routines. I think we talked a lot about this last
I
time. We talked
love
about
that.
visual supports, and then teach. Teach is the fourth one. And it seems kind of like a hierarchy, but you're not done with each thing. Like every day with a different child, you might need to go back to the, I was going to say sensory regulation,
Yeah.
because they had a rough morning. And so we're constantly going back and forth between all of these if we're going to be able to teach. And kind of what you two talked about reminds me of that.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
important.
And another piece I've been thinking about while I'm working in the clinic are those biological needs. Does the child need to use the bathroom? Are they dehydrated? Do they need a snack? Did they get terrible sleep the night before? And so, I think the one thing I've been doing is adding a drink of water at the beginning of every session. And then even with myself and my own child, I'm like, are we dehydrated? Is that why we're cranky with each other right now? And so I think that can be something simple in the classroom, especially, is making sure that the students have a drink of water, and that simple act of getting a drink of water can just help the nervous system kind of calm and be like, okay, I'm okay. I don't need to be in fight or flight right now. I have water. I have that basic need met.
Yeah. In the calming kit that I created, there's the I feel I need for the young kids. And one of the things we always have on there is a drink of water.
And
Over the years, we're like, so many kids pop right out of it if you offer them a drink of water. So it's great hearing the same thing from you two.
yes, so
I love
simple,
that.
but it makes such a big difference.
Yeah. So what other strategies, you've got the drink of water, what other strategies and supports do you recommend to start to foster these regulation skills?
I think so much we're gonna just piggyback everything that, in your what's the word? What's the word? You know, regulation, connect,
Oh
teach,
yeah,
what
the
do you call
framework,
that?
the framework.
The framework, thank you, yes. We're going to mimic the framework because really the first step is that connection and making sure that we're on the level of the child, we're getting down, we're not standing above them, we're making sure that we're building rapport with them.
And trust.
And trust, and we want them to like us. Like if the kids don't like us, they're not, as like the therapist or the caregiver or the teacher, they're not gonna be successful. So we have to make sure that we're connecting with them, they like us, we're building rapport. And then we can start implementing some of those sensory strategies. It's really trial and error, taking a sensory checklist. That way, like, what are they seeking? What are they avoiding? And then you can start implementing some strategies like, okay, they're seeking vestibular input. So let's try doing some windmills all together. Let's all crawl around the room together, and building those movement-based activities with the whole class, if applicable, can be really helpful. It's just like a little brain break.
Yeah, I think that full body movement activities incorporated into the daily routine is very important. Crawling on the floor is something that's beneficial for the brain and the body. It's some really good grounding, heavy work, and you can make it fun. You can have a little path that they have to follow around the room, and they have to navigate under and between desks and chairs and tables. Maybe you have some tunnels if it's like a preschool classroom. And then maybe they have to do some frog jumps, or the floor is lava, so they have certain things that they can walk on, and you make it fun, engaging, and really the entire classroom can benefit from something like that a couple of times throughout the day. You get a drink of water, you do your 5 minutes of full body movement, and then their brain and body might be more ready to learn.
Mhm. Yeah, and adding to that, if we are struggling to build those activities into the routine, I know it can be difficult to add one more thing. If you focus on adding these movement activities into transitions, that as well can be so beneficial. So if you're transitioning from the tables to circle time or floor time, have the children crawl, have them do animal walks, have them walk backwards, have them hop on one foot, have them hum while they're walking.
Humming is a great regulation tool, actually, because of that vibration. So humming is a great one.
So then it's easy and it's not overwhelming. And I think that when our teachers aren't overwhelmed and they just have some quick, little tricks up their sleeves to provide some of that movement and input, it can be really helpful.
Yeah, that makes me think of a student, well, several over the years, but one in particular where we'd be working one-on-one. And I think he was just didn't need as much input, but he was kind of low energy. And so he would start maybe dazing off and he wasn't there with me anymore. And so the OT had suggested doing jumping. And so we'd go, okay, let's jump. And then we'd make it fun. So it was like this game, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And then all of a sudden he's back. So even those like just little mini things
Yeah.
that you can do might be helpful too.
Yeah, I
Absolutely.
think as adults, we have to remember those simple tricks too. It's like if you are sitting at your desk all day working and you start to feel yourself, getting tired or dozing off, you get up, you take a walk around the office, you get a drink of water, you come back and you feel refreshed. It's the same for our kids, and they need even more movement because that's how they learn. That's how they are able to focus better, is with movement. And so something simple like 10 jumps, or crawl around your desk and then come back, or get up and go get a drink of water and come back, something simple and quick.
These are all great tips. Thank you so much.
Um,
Now, I know when we talked last time, we talked visual supports and regulation. Do you ever use visual supports with your autistic clients and
All the
when it comes
time.
to teaching those skills? Okay, what kind of things do you like to use?
All the time. It's very dependent on the child. I have some autistic children who do really well with an AAC device. Some children, like, on the tablet, some children who do better with like pictures on a Velcro board, or even as simple as just using a whiteboard and drawing pictures or writing the words. So it is dependent on the child and where they're at, what they like to use. You have to figure out what they actually like. Because if they don't like the communication visual support that you're using with them, they're not going to use it.
No, they definitely will not. That's the one
Yeah.
thing about our students. They're honest. They're not gonna do something just to please us. We need to find the motivation, things that they love.
Yeah.
I love the whiteboard idea. I think that's super underutilized and underrated. We would have not a whiteboard, but grab a piece of paper. Transitioning to the bus, a child is dropping down to the floor, and I'm saying to the office lady, "Can you give me a piece of paper and a pen?" And we're in the lobby in front of everybody, of course, so it's high pressure, but just simply drawing like stand up, walk to the bus, and then high five, or, it's like the worst drawing ever, but that a lot of times will help kids out. So those visuals during those times where you're like, I don't have all my things with me because I'm not in the classroom right now, that can be really helpful.
Yeah. One of my favorites right now is using like a little key ring and putting little visual pictures, whether it's, an actual picture that you take or like a little activity card that has regulation strategies, sensory strategies, or a routine. And that way they can just, attach it to them or have it in their pocket and they can look at it. You can pull it out and remind them, okay, after the bus, then we get to, or, after we walk outside, we get a high five or we get a big hug. and having that little visual in their pocket is easier to
Yeah.
keep track of.
Do you have are there any sets of visuals out there that have some of those sensory strategies that you're talking about?
Yeah, I use Brainworks. I own the company
Oh,
Sensational Brain, and so there's customizable sensory diet activities, reflexes, visual schedules, and so you just print them off. You can laminate them, hole punch them, put them on a visual, put them on a key ring, and
okay.
they're just simple pictures.
You'll have to
Yeah,
get me all the info so I can put it
yeah,
in
for
notes.
sure,
And you two
for
both
sure.
also mentioned a checklist where you can
Yes.
figure out like, is it vestibular? Is
Yeah.
it
Yep.
auditory? Is there
Yep.
something for that, a certain checklist that can be used?
Yes, so we have checklists within our digital courses, but we do have a free checklist as well. It's geared towards children ages 5 and up, but you could also use it with like the younger preschool age toddlers.
Okay.
Yeah, it does organize it by the 8 sensory systems. And so you look at the vestibular list and you mark off the ones that the child is falling into to see if they are seeking vestibular input or if they're avoidant or under responsive. So, and then it explains it to you at the end as well.
Perfect. I'll put the link for that free resource so everyone can take advantage of that too, and send me the info about your courses too. So I'll
Yeah.
put that in
Do all
there.
the Yeah, we have a bunch of free
Everything.
webinars that are helpful for people just like getting started learning, like what do I need to do? We have a bunch of those that we'll send a link for as
Awesome.
well.
I love that. Okay, one last question. How can a calming corner or a calming kit help at the preschool level?
Yes, so this is a great strategy. We often recommend this at home as well, but in the classroom would be a great place to have it too. It could be a corner of the classroom that's kind of sectioned off, or you can use like a pop-up tent. And you'll want to put things in it that are typically kind of calming and regulating. So pillows, maybe a weighted lap pad or a weighted blanket. We love the vibrating stuffed animals. Vibration can be really regulating. Maybe you can put in some like twinkle lights. And then, we'll often have maybe like a basket of some different tools, like a breathing tool to help them take some deep breaths, or a pinwheel that they can blow, because that breathing is very essential for regulation. It could also have maybe like a little bubble timer that they can visually turn. That visual stimuli can be regulating. Maybe there's a book or a puzzle. Maybe there's music, some over the ear headphones. You can kind of just try to address all of the different sensory systems with the tools that you put in there. And then teach the children what it's for and how they can use it. Maybe all of the students in the classroom can have access to it at certain times, but then you can also use it for students who need it on a more regular basis. And you can have a picture of the sensory corner maybe on their desk, so they can use that picture to cue the teacher, like, hey, I really need to take a break right now, but they don't have to use their words, or if they aren't, speaking right now, they can use the picture to identify that they need it. But teaching the children, the students, what it's for and how to use it is very important.
Yeah, and I'll just add too that I like to put like your calm down kit, like those visuals in there as well, the zones of regulation, anything that they can see and identify their emotions. I'm in the red zone right now. I'm feeling uncomfortable. A step-by-step picture of what they can do, flip over the timer, sit in the beanbag chair, read a book, put the headphones on, just like pictures of different things that they can do, because they're all visual, and having those visuals are helpful. And that way, as a caregiver, as a teacher, you can go over there and you can point to the pictures of how they're feeling, and they can help identify that, oh, okay, I've been here. I'm, happy now. I feel good. I'm ready to rock and roll. And then we can transition using crawling or bear walks or hopping back to their desk or back to the activity.
Yeah, I love all these ideas. I just think, oh my gosh, I want to go and help people develop all these for their classroom.
Ah,
I wish you could
and
just
that's your
run them
area of
to everybody.
expertise.
It's so good. And I think it's important to note too, regulation or addressing regulation doesn't just happen in a calming area. So if you don't have room and you don't have a calming corner, it's okay. But, and even if you do have one, that's not the only time that we provide the support. It's throughout the day in different ways, right?
Yeah, we talk a lot about using that proactive approach of helping them meet their sensory needs throughout the day as a way to help them stay more regulated so that if they do go into dysregulation, maybe it's not as intense, maybe it doesn't last as long. It's easier for them to regulate because their nervous system has been regulated throughout the day. Whereas if we're only using a reactive approach and we're only using these strategies in the moment, it's going to happen more frequently. It's going to be more intense. It's going to be harder to get out of.
Yeah. And when you talked about teaching or, going in and kind of teaching how to use the different tools, it's really important, I think, too, to do that when they're regulated. Because remember, learning doesn't happen. I'm saying this not for you, but for anyone listening, learning new skills does not happen when kids are dysregulated. And so they're going to throw it or reject it if we're doing it while they're not regulated.
Exactly. And then taking pictures of them in the calming corner when they're happy and when they're using it and putting those there too. So that way they can see this is the goal. I'm ready. I want to be calm and happy when I'm in here by the end.
Yeah, that's perfect. Perfect. So you two have a podcast called All Things Sensory, and it is awesome. I'm going to link it for sure. So I want everyone to go listen to it, especially just practical ideas that you two have that you can put into motion right away. And that's the kind of thing I love because all of the Autism Little Learners community, all the teachers and parents are really busy. So being able to take ideas from you and put it into action is important.
Yes.
Yeah, I think every episode ends with like tips or strategies or here's the things you can try. That's kind of our goal with every episode.
Yeah. What kind of topics do you typically cover?
Oh my gosh, everything. We talk about sensory, obviously, primitive reflex integration. We have a lot of great interviews from different professionals in the areas. Just like holistic health and finding happiness and balancing and OT information.
I was gonna say, we do have episodes on school, right? So like helping with the before and after school routine, strategies for in the classroom, bedtime. I mean, we have specific episodes on like
Potty training,
getting dressed, brushing hair, going to the dentist, like
everything with
That
like
is all needed.
yeah.
Great. What were
we
you going
love.
to say? Everything?
Everything with a sensory lens.
Yeah.
We just
Yeah.
kind of pull apart these topics and we're like, let's look at this from a sensory standpoint and see what we can help with.
Yeah. Everything you listed are all things that are needed
Ah.
for parents of young autistic kids. So that's really great. Okay. Where can everyone find you?
All of our information is on our website. It's harkla.co. And then we are on Instagram. We're at All Things Sensory Podcast. And then Harkla_family. And we share a lot of free information on both of those pages.
Yeah, you guys are going to want to go find them and just consume all of their information because it's so, so helpful. Thank you to both of you for being here today.
Thank you. This was so fun.
Tons of fun. And I'm sure we'll talk again in the future.
Oh, yes.